Defining SaaS. In this section, let's formally define SaaS. So what are the objectives? As part of this section, let's walk through a history of the software evolution, how we got to where we are today, and then we'll create a working definition of SaaS, and then we will see how SaaS is connected to what is called the long tail in the customer market. Then we'll look at SaaS and SOA, the connection between the two. After looking at all these different characteristics of SaaS, let's formally define what SaaS is, the SaaS benefits, and then how SaaS is connected to the cloud. Let's look at the software evolution. Here's what I've done. I've taken all the way from the 1950s to the 2010s or the teens and broken it down into three different eras. If you look at the 1950s, the 60s, and early part of the 70s, hardware was king. What do I mean by this? Well, in the 1950s and 60s, companies like IBM were the king. IBM, DEC, which is Digital Equipment Corporation, which doesn't exist today, but they were the big companies at that time. HP was another big one. These companies were creating hardware, they were building hardware, and they were selling hardware to large corporations. It would be companies like AT&T, MCI, large government departments like the Department of Defense, IRS. And so their customers were big customers, and they were primarily interested in selling hardware. Software was not that important to them. In fact, the software is not as important, and it can be proven by the fact that in the 1970s, when PC was invented, IBM did not even bother to put an operating system. An operating system is a piece of software. And a small company named Microsoft created the operating system, which is the MS-DOS operating system, and actually changes the entire hardware industry. So there was a time when hardware was considered to be the big thing. And then when PC came about, when lots of people started buying PC, lots of individuals and businesses started buying PC, they started moving all their accounting calculations and their communication and everything into the PC. And so now suddenly software became the king. If you think about the 1980s and the early 1990s, you'll realize that everybody was trying to build software and trying to sell the software. There were companies like Egghead, which I don't know if many of you remember. The Egghead used to be a company where you would go in and buy these different software packages. And engineers wanted to launch software and be bought by a larger company. If you think about software like Microsoft Outlook, it really was written by somebody else, and Microsoft ended up buying them. So the point I'm trying to make is software became very, very important. But then something interesting happened in the 1990s. In 1991, 1992, when web came into existence, things changed. Now the web and the internet becomes the new king, and we started seeing web not only as a medium to show content, to put content, but also as a medium where you can do e-commerce, and also as a medium where you can actually have your software on demand. So things started changing into the web. So if you think about it, nobody downloads an email server and installs an email server and runs an email server on their own. People end up using an email server that's already being installed, and you get an account on it, like Gmail or Yahoo Mail. Nobody goes and downloads an accounting software anymore. You can actually, you can do that, but you can actually get accounting software online. Google Docs. So lots of things are happening where services, software services are being placed online. So based upon all these things, let's have a working definition of SaaS. The working definition of SaaS is a hosted IT capability. It's owned, located, operated, and managed externally by some other organization. And it's really not just the application software that they're giving you. They're giving you an operating environment, they're giving you integration platforms, all the things around that particular software. But they're only giving you technology. They're not giving you any people, right? That's really a high-level definition of what SaaS may be. It's a working definition right now. It's also optimized for delivery as a service. So it's not just a hosted instance of an off-the-shelf packaged application. We used to have this concept of ASPs, application service providers, where it was like an off-the-shelf software that they would install and you would actually use that. It wasn't that. It's somebody who built a custom software and they're making it available for you. It's designed to be offered to multiple customers. So there is this multi-tenant concept. For example, if you go to Gmail, in Gmail, there are multiple users that are using the Gmail software, right? It looks like it is yours, but it's really lots of people that are using it. It's optimized for subscription-based licensing. So there is a license model where you pay on a monthly basis. Example would be Dropbox, where on a monthly basis you pay for some amount of storage online. There is also customer configuration, but not customization, right? So you configure things to what you want, but you cannot customize the software to the way you want. And then there is also transparent upgrades. Gmail consistently updates their software. Dropbox consistently updates their software, and you get that. The transparent updates are taking place. There is also some kind of an SLA that you get. You expect the software to be up 99% of the time or 99.99% of the time or whatever SLA that they're going to provide you. Of course, the other important thing is that it's a service that's available over the internet, and you typically use a browser client to access your service. So that's a working definition of SaaS based upon what has happened in the software industry. Well, if you think about it, there is something old and there is something new in this. Something old from the perspective that it's a hosted IT capability that is delivering software, and hosted IT capability is nothing new. This has been around since the 1960s. In the 1960s, many organizations, especially IBM, used to have a hosted capability where customers would actually send their tapes had all the accounting information in it, and they would actually process the data and give them reports back. So it was a hosted IT capability, right? So this idea of processing bureau and service bureau was already available in the 1960s. So from that perspective, it's something old. And then in the late 1990s, there was a buzz around something called application service provider. There was this idea where a company would have some server on the internet, and they would actually have the software installed for you, and all you have to do is use your PC or your terminal to access that software that is installed on the internet. So that was the concept of an application service provider. For example, accounting software used to be done this way. Many companies offered accounting software as an ASP service. And then in the consumer land, we also saw things like Hotmail, ICQ, AIM, communication services that came about, which was like a hosted service. If you look at AOL, America Online, you paid $15, $20 on a monthly basis. It gave you the capability to communicate with other people. It allowed you to send emails. So you also saw that in the 1990s. So it's something old from that perspective. It's something new from the perspective that web started as a library where you had content that people can come and read. It was basically a document location. And then it became a sales channel where people started putting content so they can advertise and they can talk more about that product rather than simply information about some product. It became a mechanism where you sold things. It was a sales channel. Then it became a place where you were being represented. Your thoughts were being represented. Facebook, Twitter, all those things are an example of a place. Continuing on the something new, the IT capabilities that were delivered in this web as a place context aren't real traditional applications, right? They aren't real traditional applications like accounting software. They were more communication mechanisms, right? New online services, ways by which you can do video chat, ways by which you can talk to people, ways by which you can send messages back and forth, right? And they also offered other mechanisms, other channels. For example, there was RSS feeds, so you can read somebody else's blog, blog updates. There's also APIs that were being developed, so you can actually write programs. So these are something new that has come about that didn't exist in the older model that we saw in the 1960s. And also the expectations and the appetite of the customers has changed and has grown over time. In the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, customers always called their company that they were getting their service from talk to their customer service to get their issues resolved. Today, customers want to do everything online. They want to go online. For example, I personally don't want to call the customer service for my cable company. I like to go online, change my service offerings the way I want to, rather than calling somebody up and talking to them and upgrading my cable service to the next level, or even downgrading the cable service to the lower level. Right? I want to do it all by myself. Same thing, if I want to look at my cell phone bill, I want to log in online and see what my cell phone bill looks like and where I made the most calls. So customers want that. They don't really want to talk to another person. So things are changing. Things have changed, and customers have this expectation. SaaS is really an optimization of software. If you look at software, what is really software? Well, you take your best practices and then you kind of program it, and so that makes it efficient, that makes your business efficient. That's really what software is all about. So it's the access to best practice. It's also custom, something that you want to make for your own company that is special for your company. It's also control. You have control as to what are the features that you want to have. So that's really software. Then there is this concept of off-the-shelf functionality. Rather than you building the software by yourself, you could go buy a third-party software off the shelf, install it, and use it. This allowed you to get to the market faster, and it was lower risk. You didn't really have to sit down and hire all these developers, build the software, test the software. You just used something that was already implemented and kind of started using it for your company. So we saw that in the marketplace. And then there is this concept called hosted software that came about, where there were companies that offered a solution, like I mentioned to you before, where they would actually install a hardware, install the software, manage everything around the software, and all you have to do is connect to that software and use the software. The idea there was, this is very similar to the ASP model. There was no capital expenditure and no infrastructure cost. Everything was managed by them, and all you did was pay on a monthly basis. Now we are seeing this SaaS revolution, which is a specialization. So the point I'm trying to make is, you first had software, and then we got into this off-the-shelf software, and then we narrowed down to get into this hosted software, and now we are narrowing it down to getting into something called SaaS, which is a simpler customization model. You can get quicker upgrades because somebody is managing the software for you. It's more sophisticated identity. You can have different users, different roles. There's also SLA. So you can ask the SaaS provider to say that you want the software to be available 24/7, 99% of the time, 365 days, and things like that. So there's a much higher SLA, and you can even have access to it from multiple devices. So there's a lot of things that have happened in the marketplace to get to where we are. And this new market is what we call SaaS. The interesting thing is that SaaS actually helps the long tail. Now, what is the long tail? Well, if you think about it, you have the customers that are the large customers, which is this right here. This is the set of large customers. They usually build their own custom software. They get their own developers, they get their own testers, they get their own operations people. They do it all by themselves. So they have their own software. Then you have your typical customers, which are these medium customers, which end up maybe buying an off-the-shelf software and customizing it, or maybe build their own custom software, maybe not as extensive as the large customers. But then there is this non-addressable market. There's a whole bunch of businesses that are small that cannot afford to launch their own software. They cannot even have the initial capital investment, and nobody's addressing that market. And that's really what SaaS allows you to do, actually. SaaS basically says, if you can provide software as a service to large customers, medium customers, and small customers, and get an economy of scale going by lowering your cost, then you can offer this service to all the customers. And that's really how SaaS started. How do we address these smaller customers that want to have access to it? Well, I want to point out that that doesn't mean that SaaS is only for small customers. It can also be for large customers. Even large customers can use it. In fact, that's what is happening in the marketplace. More and more large customers are beginning to use SaaS. So SaaS is addressing the long tail. Now, there's a lot of terms that you may have heard. There is this term called SaaS, which is software as a service, which you're trying to define. There is also this ASP that I kind of mentioned to you, which is application service provider model. There is also this another thing called service-oriented architecture, SOA, that became very popular in the 1990s. And then there are these things called monolithic apps. Now, what I'm trying to say to you is that SaaS is to ASP, is SOA is to monolithic apps. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, monolithic apps are these apps that people will build where every customer will have their own application server and have their own database. So these are your monolithic apps. We then moved into a model which is called the SOA model in the late 1990s and early 2000s, where we said, well, we can have customers, but then rather than all these monolithic apps only talking to themselves, let's have these different applications communicate with each other. So we have customers that have access to services from multiple applications. So this was a natural progression, progressing from the monolithic app into a service-oriented architecture. Was a very good progression. Then we saw an ASP model. I mean, it's also happening on the side, which is the application service provider model, where you can have customers coming over the internet, over some kind of a network, accessing services. And they were accessing their services, their own custom services. So if you look at this, customers are accessing their own application, which is accessing their own database, and same thing in this way. But they are coming over the internet, versus all this is happening within the premise. The natural progression for them was to get into a model where different customers can access different services, and all these different services can communicate with each other. So it was a natural progression for them too. The ASP also had to progress this way, go from an ASP model into a SaaS model. If you think about it, if you look at it carefully, SaaS and SOA is really two sides of the same coin. What it really does is creates a single network, a single service network. So the idea here is that you can have your customers, you can have your services, and all these services can be accessed over the network, and they can all communicate with each other. So SaaS and SOA kind of work together to some extent. Let's formally define SaaS. SaaS is a model of software delivery. So it is the delivery of software where the software company that is delivering the software provides maintenance of the software, daily technical operation, and also support for the software to their client. It assumes that software is going to be delivered over the internet, and the software is going to be delivered to home consumers, small businesses, medium businesses, and large businesses. So what are the SaaS benefits? By moving into a SaaS model, a company can stay focused on the business processes rather than becoming an IT company. Change the idea of a software to be an operating expense instead of a capital expense. When I say operating expense, by paying on a monthly basis, it's considered to be an operating expense rather than buying the hardware, buying the software, buying the licenses, rather than doing any of that stuff, which is an upfront cost. They're making it as an operating expense. Creates a consistent application environment for all the users. The users can access it from any location. They can access it using the web browser. It can also be accessed using apps, which is the newer model now that has come about. There is no concern for cross-platform support because it is over the web. It's easy access. You don't have to physically be in your company. You can access it over the internet. Reduced piracy of your software. You don't have to worry about any piracy concern because when you actually sell software, when customers buy it, they may pirate it, install it in 40 different places. That doesn't happen anymore. There is also lower cost. And the lower cost is because you're treating it as an operating expense rather than capital expense. And also because of the economy of scale that the SaaS provider is having, they can actually lower the monthly cost for you. There is also continuous technology enhancements. What I mean by that is, as the technology changes, you will be able to use that new technology without investing money on this new technology. Let me give you an example. Initially, when the web started, it was a static HTML page, then it became dynamic HTML, then it became even cool dynamic, which is the Ajax technology, and now we have mobile applications which can access over the REST protocol, the services. So as the technology changes, you can actually start using the newer technology because the SaaS provider will constantly upgrade their software in order to stay competitive. Well, let's connect the SaaS and the cloud. Well, SaaS is really a software program that's positioned as a shared cloud service, right? If you think about it, there's a cloud service that lots of different customers are having access to. It's a shared cloud service. Examples: CRM software. Salesforce has CRM software. Office 360, which is offering email, calendar, contact. There's the Google Work documents, Google Docs, or even the Office 365 Word documents that give you access to Office software online. There's also HR software, supply chain management software, project management software, integrated development environment. Even IDEs are now available as a SaaS service. There's also virtual desktop. You don't even have to buy a desktop. You can have desktop as a software as a service available over the net, which is one of the things that we want to look at in this module. There's an entire marketplace that exists around SaaS. In one of the sections later on, we will talk about all these different SaaS providers and the various SaaS services that they are offering. That'll give you a much better idea as to what the different SaaS services are that are available. Now let's compare the various cloud service delivery model. If you recall, you've seen this picture when we talked about cloud computing in the first module, and then we saw this picture when we talked about IaaS, and then you saw this picture when we talked about PaaS. Now let's look at this from the SaaS perspective. If you look at software, if you have to manage the whole thing, then you have to worry about networking, storage, servers, virtualization, OS, middleware, runtime, data, and applications. And when it came to IaaS, you did not have to worry about networking, storage, servers, and virtualization. You only brought in the operating system that you cared about, the middleware, the runtime, data, and the applications. So that's IaaS. In the PaaS model, you didn't have to worry about networking, storage, servers, virtualization, OS, middleware, and runtime. All you worried about was bringing your application and the data that goes with it. Now, in the SaaS model, you don't have to worry about networking, storage, servers, virtualization, OS, middleware, runtime, applications, and data. All these things are managed for you in the managed environment, which is accessible over the internet, right? So you don't have to invest on any of these things. It's all done ready for you. Just use it. Comparing this to the pizza delivery model, if you recall, if you had to make your own pizza, made at home pizza, you had to get all the ingredients, get all the equipment, and make the pizza yourself. Whereas in the infrastructure as a service model, you get the ingredients, but then you had to get your own equipment and make your own pizza. Whereas in the PaaS model, you got the ingredients and then the equipment was also provided for you. You simply made the pizza, and then of course you had to bring in your own dining table and soda. Whereas in the SaaS model for pizza, you don't have to get the ingredients, you don't have to get the equipment, and you don't even have to get any of the dining table or soda. All you have to do is bring yourself and eat the pizza. Order the pizza and eat the pizza, right? So it's all vendor managed in the case of SaaS. In summary, we learned that SaaS has been around for a long time. It's nothing new. It's something old, something new. It has evolved over time. We went from custom software to off-the-shelf software to hosted software and now to a SaaS platform. We also learned that just like monolithic apps moved into the SOA model, the ASP moved into the SaaS model. And when you combine SaaS and SOA, you get a SaaS model where different SaaS services can communicate with each other. We also learned that SaaS addresses different types of customers, small, medium, and large customers. Nobody is left behind because it's easy to enter into the market without much investment. And we formally define SaaS as a model of software delivery. It's a software delivery model where the software company or the SaaS company provides the maintenance, daily technical operation, and support of the software to their clients. And don't forget that you can actually build SaaS software on IaaS or PaaS platforms. So if you want to write your own SaaS software, you're welcome to go ahead and build it on top of an IaaS platform where you install your own application servers and platforms and then you run your software on it. Or you can take a PaaS platform and write a software and that would be deployed into the PaaS platform and offer it as a SaaS service.